Welcome to The Insider at Heritage Museums and Gardens, where every other week we chat with guests and museum staff about all the exciting things that are happening in season here at the museum. This year, the museum is celebrating its 50th anniversary, so please plan to join us. My name is Judith Getz, and I'm happy to be your host today. In this episode, we're speaking with Amanda Wastrom, our Assistant Curator. Today, we're talking about Human Nature, our outdoor exhibit this year. Wonderful to have you here, Amanda.
Hi.
And so we are outside, in case you hear a little bit of the wind. But we are here to talk about something that's very special, and special in my eyes because it's something that captivates people's imagination in ways that is kind of different than an indoor exhibit. And we're talking about outdoor art, and I was wondering if we could start by just talking about the title. What Human Nature, what were we trying to express with that?
Well, I guess it's a little bit of a pun. I mean, the phrase human nature, people use that all the time, and it has a very specific meaning in terms of referring to the way we are as human beings. But for this, I guess to back up, the big picture kind of one-line nugget about what this exhibit is about is really how humans and nature, or humans and our natural environment, how we interact, how do we overlap, how do we balance each other out, where do things cross over, what kinds of, are there areas of conflict, things like that. Just how do we exist as beings in the world. And so, if we're talking about how we as humans react with nature, it just seemed like taking those two words and butting them up against each other was kind of a fun play on the name, on the phrase human nature.
Now, when we're talking about human nature, we're talking about pieces that, it's actually for those that have been to Heritage in the past and seen our outdoor exhibits, they've usually been put in place all at once in April and then enjoyed throughout the season. This year, we have 5 of them, and they are being placed at different times. So we started out back in April with the placement of Beacon. What can you tell us about Beacon?
So Beacon, it was done by the myth makers, Donna Dodson and Andy Moreline, who are from Maynard, Massachusetts. And Beacon is, to describe it, it's about 15 feet tall. It's constructed out of bamboo in terms of, you almost might want to think of like basket work in a way. It's sort of an open weave. And it is a figure, and the top part is an osprey's head, and the bottom is sort of more person-like. I mean, it doesn't have articulated arms and legs, but it is more like a human figure at the bottom. And this particular piece, Andy and Donna are very much into the idea of storytelling. That's where their name, the Myth Makers, comes from. Their interest in telling stories through their work. And I see a lot of their work as, they're kind of symbols. They're using images from folklore or kind of making their own sort of modern folklore in a way with these particular sculptures that they do. And so the story that they're trying to tell with this particular piece is the story of the osprey and Rachel Carson. Again, that's sort of like Rachel Carson, the human, osprey, the nature. And so Rachel Carson, a well-known environmentalist, wrote Silent Spring in the 1960s, a really seminal book on the effects of DDT poisoning on our environment. And Andy and Donna were interested in that sort of complicated situation. For a lot of people, DDT was a huge game changer, but it did not come without its risks and its problems. It was hugely detrimental to the bird populations, and particularly large birds of prey like bald eagles and ospreys. What they ended up discovering was that the DDT the higher up on the food chain you were, the more DDT you would sort of accumulate from the other animals that you were eating. And it got to a level where it would affect the eggs of these birds, and their eggs, the shells were too thin, and so they were not able to reproduce. And it really was Rachel Carson's book that opened the public's eyes to what DDT, the damage DDT was causing. And you can draw a direct line between her book and the eventual banning of DDT as in wide use. And, fast forward 50 years, 55 years or so, and today ospreys are thriving, as are bald eagles. The populations have really rebounded, and what's nice is that this whole story has a really local connection in that we've seen, even from my childhood to now here on Cape Cod, the populations of ospreys coming back more and more frequently with every year. And Rachel Carson herself was a researcher at Woods Hole and spent a lot of time down there. So it's a really nice piece, I think.
No, it is exquisite, and it's been shown. It was up in Boston most recently, I believe. So for those that are enjoying, something that is easily photographed with others, it's a great piece to be photographed with. So instantly Instagrammable, I guess you could say, but recognizable as well. And as you mentioned, there's a big story attached to it as well, one that people should pay a little bit of attention to. We have something that is, one thing I do want to mention is that there is a map located on our website that kind of illustrates where a majority of these pieces are going to be placed or have been placed. The next one that was in place or put in place in May was entitled Stall.
The second piece is titled Stall by an artist, Nancy Winship Milliken. She's based in Charlotte, Vermont. And Nancy's work, she uses somewhat non-traditional sculpture materials in her work, usually natural materials combined with something like steel or some kind of armature. In terms of natural materials, it's often sheep's wool, horsehair, that kinds of thing. And again, she is definitely interested in the way that humans and animals interact, whether it's sort of our rural New England farming traditions or, how we use animals, how we use animal materials and things like that. So Stall, it's constructed, it's about, again, 15 feet tall. It's a large large steel frame, and almost like a big picture frame or a big window. And hanging from it is I best described probably as a curtain made of horsehair. And the horsehair is actually taken it's reclaimed from cello bows. So she works with luthiers in New York and Philadelphia. And so luthiers, when they restring bows from various musicians, they put all the horsehair aside, and she takes it and uses it in her work. And I think what's interesting about the piece, when it's finished, you think of a cello bow, these horsehair tied, strung so tightly that they really lose the sense of the animal. And she, in a way, you could think she's sort of like freeing the horsehair and placing it back, and it flows again as hair does. The way that the curtain moves in the wind is really beautiful. It sort of ripples, and it's one of those pieces you can see it as you're walking from a distance. And so my hope is that your curiosity is piqued enough to approach it and investigate what exactly is going on there. But I think there's something just really poetic about, it ripples in the wind. Wind is something you feel, but you maybe don't see. And that the construction of this piece really makes the wind visible in a way.
Well, you've made me look at this piece very differently. I've seen it outside my window, and I just never thought of it that way. And I think it has to do with exactly what you had said, the reclaiming of the freedom for the horsehair. That's fascinating. And of course, that one, both of these pieces that you just mentioned right now, and the rest of the pieces as well, will be on exhibit until we close in October on the 14th.
So we wanted to space them out a little bit to give every artist their sort of moment a little bit. And these pieces are, I think, a little more ambitious and a little larger than what we've done, at least in the recent past. So that helps us, I think, logistically a little too, that we can give each artist our full attention. And in addition, several of them, not all of them, are coming back the following day to do an art making workshop. And the hope with that is that the artists, most of these artists, in fact, almost all of them, I think, are also teachers or have taught extensively in their past. So that, this will give people a chance to really meet with the artists, try their hand at using the same kinds of materials that these artists use, and just play. I mean, so much of art in its early phases is just messing around with materials, and so I think that's our hope with the workshop, is that visitors have a chance to mess around with the artists.
Yeah, absolutely,
too.
because the materials are all very different, including the next one that we're going to talk about, which also was installed in May, which is Gins Grinberg's. Is that correct? Did
Yes.
I have that right? All right.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about that piece.
So his piece is titled Nanospheres, and Gintz works mainly in steel and metal, and that was another goal of the exhibit, was through the selection of these artists try to present a really wide range of working methods and techniques and materials. And so his pieces are spherical. There's going to be a grouping of them, different shapes and sizes, and different patterns. So he usually takes some sort of repeated pattern and creates the sphere out of it. So they're really geometric. They're pretty kind of mesmerizing, and sort of for those those human brains that like symmetry, there's something really appealing about them from that standpoint. To me, they resemble giant marbles a little bit. And Gintz is really interested in I would say both the micro parts of our world and the macro parts of our natural world. So he loves looking at pictures of faraway galaxies. He's very interested in the black hole, the photographs of the black hole that were discovered recently, and but also, microscopic images of cells and cellular organizations and things like that. And just so, kind of inspired by the way that nature organizes itself.
And what is the title of this piece?
Nanospheres.
Okay. So again, with the theme that you had mentioned, making tiny into big, I guess you could say in a sense.
Yep.
All right, so next on the list is actually Michelle Luigi. And tell me a little bit about her piece.
So her piece is titled Chrysalis. Michelle is from Cambridge, Massachusetts. A lot of Massachusetts artists this year, which is really nice. And Michelle, again, a slightly non-traditional material. For her sculpture, they're almost entirely constructed out of single-use plastic trash bags. Not trash bags, shopping bags. So the kinds of bags that people use at the grocery store or things like that. And what she does with the plastic is she cuts it into really long strips, and then she crochets with it. And so
I can't even imagine. You've said this many times that I have not been able to picture this in my mind.
Yeah.
But it's a fabulous. I've seen pictures of the end result, so it is definitely something that is done very well.
Yeah. So she once she crochets her forms, she uses harder materials as an armature, and puts the forms over the top, and I think it's one of those pieces that you can see, oh, that's cool in photographs, but when you really get up close to them, you can see the knotwork and the stitching. And, she uses the different colors of the plastic to her advantage as well. And, for her, again, she is taking this material that is pretty problematic, but also useful. Plastic is another example similar to DDT of something that was a complete life changer in so many ways. You think of the ways that plastic is used in medical procedures and for sanitation and things like that. It has really transformed our world, but it is not without its problems and its downsides, and one of those problems being the accumulation of plastic in our environment. And that's something, again, with a really local connection here on Cape Cod. I think most towns at this point have banned the use of single-use trash bags with concerns about litter and polluting the ocean and things like that. So I think Michelle's, she has stated in some of her, artist statements and things like that she, nature is her muse again. She finds the forms of nature, such as the chrysalis, really beautiful and inspiring. And so, to take this really sort of quintessentially human material and make something directly referencing nature out of it. I think, again, she's playing with the balance of humans and nature. How do we work together?
Almost like a rebirth in a sense. Yeah.
How do we respond to each other, and how do we live together too?
Yes, absolutely. And our last, should we say, outdoor exhibit selector or piece is a piece by Timothy Ellis Cole.
Yes, so his piece is titled Sea Flea, an Americana Art Adventure. It's a lengthy title. And his piece is going to be located down by Champon. So all of the other pieces will be on the main area so everyone can see it. We think that's important, whether you're walking exploring the entire campus, or you're just going down the main road, that you can still see these pieces. Unfortunately for Tim's, it needed to be by the pond.
Yes.
It made sense. So his piece, what he is doing is taking, and Tim lives in New Bedford, so he's also a local artist. He took a vintage hydroplane, which is a sort of home-built boat from the kind of mid-20th century. And the history of these boats is really fascinating. I'm not going to remember the designer's name, but the boat designer published these plans in a magazine that was sort of the precursor to Popular Mechanics magazine back in the early, like 1930s, 1940s. It was sort of a high-performance speedboat, but something that people could build at home. Mm-hmm. Sort of the precursor to the jet ski, I guess you would say. And these boats were built here on Cape Cod and were actually raced up and down Cape Cod Canal. This particular boat was, I believe it was Tim's father-in-law's, something like that. So he is kind of repurposing it. He's painting it and finishing it up, fixing it up. And it's going to be installed in front of Champon in a way that visitors can climb into it. And he's going to stage. So Tim's interests lie in folk art and illustration and graffiti. He paints a lot and does hand lettering and things like that. So in addition to kind of transforming the hydroplane boat, he's also including a sort of greetings from Cape Cod vintage styled hand lettered sign so that people can take their own, again, sort of Instagrammable shot of them on Cape Cod in their little vintage hydroplane. So I think that piece is going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Sort of, responding to folk art traditions, but making, again, kind of a modern folk art piece, I think.
And very Cape Cod-y.
Yeah.
Well, this is terrific. So we're talking about 5 different pieces. If you want to learn more about where they're located or more about the artists themselves, we encourage you to go to our website, which is heritagemuseums.org. All of these pieces will be up by when?
Tim's is the last, and his is going up in August. So there's 3 going up in May, 1 in July, and then 1 in August.
Okay. And again, they will be in place until we close, which is October 14th, Monday, October 14th, which is Columbus Day weekend. Terrific. Well, I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of The Insider at Heritage Museums and Gardens. We've been talking to Amanda Wastrom, our Assistant Curator, about our outdoor exhibit, Human Nature. Today's interview has been brought to you by Arbella Insurance Foundation and Cape Cod 5, our 2019 season sponsors, and the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod. You can hear more interviews like this one by finding us on iTunes. And of course, more information about Heritage Museums and Gardens and upcoming programming can all be found on our website at heritagemuseums.org. Until next time, thank you so much for listening.